Okay, good morning and welcome to the August 20th, 2026 Board of Police Commissioners meeting. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across southern Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. City of Regina owes its strength and vibrancy to these lands and the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory, as well as settlers from around the world who continue to be welcomed here and call Regina home. Okay, first up, can I have a motion to approve the public agenda? Councillor Radens, call the question. Any opposed? And carried. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting held on July 21st, 2026? Thank you, Doug. Any errors or omissions? No, I'll call the question. Any opposed? And carried. Okay, first item is PO 26-30, Regina Police Service Mid-Year Crime Statistics, January to June 2017 to 2026. I'll kick it over to you, Chief Davies.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So this report is a report that we receive every 6 months. It's a 10-year crime comparison. So this will be for the first 6 months of 2026. I'd like to introduce Ms. Camelin Martin from our analysis unit. She will walk us through the information. Camelin, please go ahead.
Thank you and good morning. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up here. Okay. Today I'll be presenting the Regina Police Service's mid-year crime statistics for January through June, covering the years 2017 to 2026. The purpose of this report is to provide the board with a high-level overview of crime trends in Regina over the past decade, with an emphasis on the data presented in the various charts. This morning, rather than going through every number on the charts, I'll highlight some of the key trends and changes the service is seeing. Before getting into the numbers, I'd like to provide some context for the data. The statistics in this report are based on police-reported crime and are intended to help us understand the volume and types of crime being reported in Regina. This report builds on the monthly crime statistics provided to the board by looking at those numbers over a longer period of time. By looking back over 10 years, we can see whether changes from one year to the next are part of a broader trend or something more recent. I'll start with the overall picture. Total crime includes offenses against persons, property, and other criminal code violations, while excluding traffic and drug-related offenses. In the first half of 2026, the RPS recorded 8,680 criminal incidents. That's a 1% decrease from the same period last year and a 13% decrease from 2017. At the overall level, reported crime remains below where it was a decade ago. Looking at the individual categories provides a more detailed picture of the overall trend, and I'll turn to those categories next. I'll start with crimes against the person, which is commonly referred to as violent crime. One important distinction here is that these numbers represent victims rather than incidents. There were 1,525 victims reported during the first half of 2026. That's a 2% decrease from 2025, but the number of victims remains 20% higher than in 2017. The year-over-year decline is therefore accompanied by a higher level of reported victims than we saw a decade ago. There were 2 homicide victims and 2 attempted murder victims during the first half of 2026. These were the lowest mid-year totals in the 10-year review period. Both offenses were also substantially below their highest levels during the period reviewed, with attempted murder reaching its peak in 2019 and homicide peaking in 2020. Assaults show a different trend. There were 1,088 assault victims reported during the first half of 2026. That's a 3% increase over 2025 and 22% higher than in 2017. Approximately 37% involved a domestic relationship. One of the more notable longer-term trends is the changing composition of assaults. Level 2 assaults, those involving bodily harm or a weapon, now account for approximately 44% of all assaults. In 2017, that figure was 29%. The volume of assaults is one consideration, but the changing severity profile is also relevant when looking at the longer-term trend. Looking next to sexual offenses, there were 102 sexual assault victims reported in the first half of 2026. That's an 18% decrease from 2025, although the number remains above the 2017 level. Approximately 30% involved an intimate partner relationship. There were also 51 victims of other sexual offenses, including offenses such as sexual interference, luring a child online, and voyeurism. That is above the 2017 to 2025 average of 42 victims. Robbery shows another declining trend. There were 99 robbery victims reported during the first half of 2026. That is the lowest mid-year total in the 10-year review period. It represents a 16% decrease from 2025 and is 12% below the 2017 level. Of those robberies, 52% were street robberies, while 12% were commercial robberies. Turning now to property crime. Property crime increased by 5% compared with the first half of 2025. That increase was driven almost entirely by a rise in theft incidents. Most of the other property crime categories declined, including motor vehicle theft, break and enter, mischief, and arson. Theft is the main driver of the increase in property crime this year. Reported theft increased by 23% compared with 2025. The majority of that increase came from thefts under $5,000. Thefts over $5,000 also increased, but continue to represent a small proportion of all reported thefts. Two types of theft that saw notable increases were theft from vehicles, which increased by 43%, and shoplifting, which increased by 27%. While theft has increased compared with 2025, the overall number of reported thefts remains 4% below the level recorded in 2017. Break and enters show a different longer-term trend. Break and enters have continued their decline over the past decade. In the first half of 2026, both residential and business break and enters were at their lowest mid-year totals in the review period. This is one of the clearer long-term declines within the property crime category. The next category is other criminal code violations. These include procedural offenses, offensive weapon violations, and other selected offenses. Overall, these offenses decreased by 8% from 2025 and are 9% below the 2017 level. Procedural offenses make up approximately 88% of this category and continue to have the greatest influence on the overall trend. These include offenses such as failure to attend, breaches of probation, and bail violations. During the first half of 2026, procedural offenses declined compared with both 2025 and 2017. The final measure I want to touch on today is calls for service. During the first half of 2026, the RPS responded to 29,649 calls for service. That's a 4% increase over 2025. Despite that increase, the overall volume remains consistent with the longer-term trend. Calls for service provide a broader indication of the demand being placed on the service beyond the number of criminal incidents being reported. To summarize, the first half of 2026 presents a mixed but generally encouraging picture. Total reported crime is down compared with both 2025 and 2017. We've seen positive trends in areas such as homicide, attempted murder, robbery, and break and enter, with several of those categories reaching their lowest mid-year levels of the past decade. At the same time, there are areas that continue to warrant attention. Crime data provides an important basis for understanding the demands placed on the service, identifying emerging trends, and informing our priorities, strategies, and resource decisions moving forward. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you for the presentation. I've just a question around population impact, and just wondering if that plays into kind of the 10-year comparable to kind of indicate, like, is that part of that, is to kind of show where there's a certain level of, impact from population growth, but also the comparison to see, the trend, or kind of how does that play into it, I guess?
Population can have an effect over crime rate. This report specifically looks at volume, but that population ties into the StatCan information that's released every year in July usually. But that's something that we can do for the year end. Crime stats is a lot easier to pull
It together.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say we can pull that for the next report.
Awesome. No, that's totally fair. Do I have any questions from my colleagues? Go ahead, Robert.
Just a comment, but off of that there, if we could splice just the future total crime graph by population, but as well as the officer count, I think that would be a useful statistic to see. Thank you.
Okay. And Michelle?
Thank you very much for that report. I'm not sure how often the public looks at our detailed reports, if they're as nerdy as I am reading this stuff, but a couple things that I thought would be good to highlight would be in that Appendix B, and not to change, but just to highlight for the public here. But you mentioned how the crime data is reported. So the nonviolent as incident counts, and then the crimes against person are victim counts, because a single incident might involve multiple victims. So just kind of, you've already got that in your report, but just to highlight it for the public here in case they didn't read it. And then the other thing I found really not interesting, but new to me, was that the crime data reports may change over time as investigations progress. So if somebody is looking at those detailed numbers and they change, saying, well, it was this in June, it was this in July, am I accurate in reading this?
That's correct,
correctly?
yeah.
Okay, good. So not a question, but just bringing it to light.
Oh, that's really good point for sure. Any other questions from members? Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, just my question. I guess the point I wanted to point out is, yeah, we are at a 10-year low for a number of items. That's great to see. I think, obviously that probably ties into good police work. It also ties into just trends that are beyond our control. What I'd be curious to see in future as well is for our calls for service, that's maintained around 30,000 for 10 years. I'd like to see, what makes up those calls for service. How many are, led into, let's say, mental health and addiction that 10 years maybe was a lot lower. So I'd be interested to see that data.
Councillor Sickleys?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the report. I wanted to, I'm going from a low to now a high. A high in the wrong direction, the Regina Admissions to Complex Needs Facility. Well, I shouldn't probably say it that way. I guess my point is I see the trend, and I know that we have a facility now that we didn't have before, so that's obvious to me. But my question when looking at this to our members is, what did we do before?
I can answer that question, Councillor. So before we had complex needs, there were two basic sort of primary off-roads. So number one, they would end up in our detention facility. So under provincial legislation, someone can be arrested for being intoxicated in a public place. They can be held for 24 hours without charge. So they would end up in our detention until our detention staff felt like they were able to care for themselves, which, I mean, it shouldn't be a police detention issue. It obviously it's bare bones down there in terms of the services we provide. And at the complex needs facility, obviously they have access to a social worker, a nurse, medical care. Or the other place that they would go would be to the emergency room. And again, not ideal for somebody. It's not necessarily an emergent issue, but just need somewhere to go to be able to ensure that they're safe during the time that they can able to take care of themselves. So the complex needs has been a big game changer for us, and in terms of interrupting that cycle, we release someone from our detention facility, we just let them out and away they go. Complex needs, like I say, they have access to medical professionals, talk about housing, talk about, if they were interested in treatment, and then they're able to facilitate that. They provide rides, ensure that somebody can get to where they need to go. So it's certainly been a huge improvement in the way that we take care of the people in our community who are our most vulnerable. So it was long overdue, and we certainly appreciate the fact that we have access to that facility currently.
And I would suspect we'd likely see these numbers high into the future, higher than they were back in August of 24, less than 100. Now we're at almost 300.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, our downtown safety team, I would say, has probably had the biggest impact in terms of transporting to complex needs. So it's cyclical, I would say, in terms of maybe what's happening specifically, the weather. There's lots of different contributing factors, but certainly, we're ensuring that those who need the care are able to receive it in the best way possible.
And one of the discussions I have when we're having casual discussions with cops, and our cops are tops, by the way, just to remind everybody, is that they're increasingly feeling like they're doing social work. And I thought I might give you a chance to comment on that.
I mean, I think Camelin spoke to sort of the nature of the calls for service. That's not broken down in our report, but certainly the large majority of what we deal with are not criminal code violations. So social disorder, I would say, is a huge part of our work. I was just at the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police meeting, and there was a reference that from one of the agencies saying about 80% of their calls for service were social disorder related. And so it's one of those things that we talk about quite often is, are police the best to respond to these types of calls? In many situations, yes, there might be a legislative requirement. We might need to be able to go there to make sure that the scene is safe for other service providers. But at 3 in the morning, there aren't very many people who are doing that type of work who can respond to, a mental health crisis, an addictions crisis. And so we are the ones who respond. So, I think probably over the past 10 years, we would have seen an increase for sure. And, there's so many factors that contribute to that, not just in our community, but really in North America. If we're talking about housing, poverty, addictions, mental health, we're certainly not alone in that challenge. And the trick really for us is collaboration, working with other agencies to interrupt some of those cycles, but being innovative in terms of how we can partner. So, for instance, our policing crisis teams, right? That's police officer, a mental health trained social worker who is an employee of the Sask Health Authority that, can make those connections into their doctor, make an appointment, get them where they need to go. So I think more of those types of innovative programs is where we need to go.
And do you see this, I'm going to use the word transformation because it's early in the morning, I can't think of another word. Evolution of policing is not the way it was, shown in Hollywood movies years ago, of a beat cop walking down the street and knowing everyone in the neighborhood. Now it seems like policing has changed quite a bit. And what do you see happening moving forward?
Well, I would challenge that a little bit because I think our downtown safety team, they know everybody who's downtown. They interact with our business owners, the people who are regularly walking to and fro, the people who maybe are more vulnerable. So they do know their community, and certainly Kyle McFetridge is here. He's my superintendent in charge of community services. Both my deputies are on holidays this week. But Kyle's job where he is, and one of his big missions, is to ensure that our frontline officers are getting out, engaging with the community, knowing who's in their community, going to events, not just responding to a 911 call. So I think that that's really something that you're going to see moving forward, is it's important for us to be there in good times and in bad times. But I think in terms of the job has changed, for sure. But we are here at the benefit of our community, and we do the job that we're required to do. And if that means that we, have more interactions maybe with people with mental health issues or addictions issues, then, that's how we need to respond to the evolving needs of our community. But certainly always open to partnerships and innovation and looking at best practices from across the country.
Excellent. That was a good answer. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, great questions, great discussion on that. Any other questions from members on this one? Manmeet, go ahead.
So one comment and then a question. The comment, we were at CAPG last week, and on Friday I took the opportunity, or I got the opportunity to visit Edmonton Police Headquarters downtown. What I found there is they are doing something very similar, but within the facility. Their complex need, it's not a complex need facility per se, it's more, they've got a detention center with about, I believe, 18 rooms or something, where they are going to bring people intoxicated in public, being nuisance and whatnot. They're allowed to keep them over for 24 hours, and then they are handing them over to Recovery Alberta. So I believe that's a pilot that is happening in Edmonton. Everyone's looking up to it. Maybe that's the future of policing. I don't know. Was just a comment.
Yes, so Alberta has recently introduced legislation similar to the legislation that's in Saskatchewan, the Compassionate Care Intervention Act. And I know that Edmonton is doing that pilot of housing them in their facility. To be honest, you know, I don't love it. I think that there are other service providers in our community who can aptly do that, provide that service. When you have somebody in custody in your building, you're certainly increasing the level of risk for your organization and for our members who work there. So when we are able to transfer care to another agency, you know, I think that that's best case scenario in terms of having health professionals look after them. But will be interesting to see, and certainly we'll keep an eye on how that, you know, how that develops. But we're always looking for best practices, and I know that that is very relatively new that Edmonton is taking that on. I think part of it was that they had that space in their facility, and so it wasn't like they needed to build something new to be able to make that happen. So yeah, certainly something we'll keep an eye on.
Yeah, good answer. Moving on, just looking at the break and enter numbers, I see that there's been a decline. So 2 questions there. I see 3 different categories: residential, business, and other. Can you expand a bit on what other might mean? Would vandalism of vehicle count as other with break and enter? Second, do you think our camera registry is playing into it? Because I see almost 40% decline from 2024 to 2026. Could that have an impact? Can you speak to it?
Cameron, I'm going to let you speak to the first part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So other break and enters are basically everything that doesn't fit within residential or business. So it could be a detached shed. It could be like a compound that's not for business purposes. It could be like a churchyard, that kind of thing. So anything that doesn't actually fit in residential or business. So it's a kind of a catch-all.
In terms of the registry, you know, I think that we couldn't point to one specific thing to say that's having an impact, but in terms of break and enters, oftentimes we have prolific offenders who do a large number of break and enters before we can arrest them and hold them accountable. So I think the air support unit is a big part of that. If we can catch them in the act at their first break and enter, then we're certainly preventing further incidents. I think obviously police visibility, being out in areas that we know potentially there has been an increase in break and enters, certainly that plays a part in it. And I think camera registry, but sort of overall, the availability of surveillance cameras. You know, when our officers know that there's video available, they're looking at it with a keen eye to be able to determine if they can identify the suspect, and then they share that with our members. And every day I'm seeing an email saying, oh yeah, I know who that is, that's so-and-so, and that's forwarded to the investigator. So I think all of those things all help contribute to that decrease in numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. I want to bring up the fact that I had a chance to do some job shadowing with Shannon Walter, who's your communications manager in the communications center. And as a public representative on the board here, I want to say that it was an eye-opening experience. And I was going to bring it forward in the next report, but I think it makes sense here talking about officers becoming social workers. And one of the things that I found very interesting, that I think there needs to be a lot of public awareness, because this team definitely isn't recognized by the public as much as they should, or I think maybe the public doesn't know enough about what they do, but they are the absolute first point of contact for anybody who has an emergency or a non-emergency, or if the public just doesn't know where to go, they're calling our Regina Police Service. So I really appreciated that opportunity. I will be doing some officer shadowing. I'm not sure if I'll last 12 hours like you did, Mayor, but so the one thing I wanted to talk about here is that when people are calling in, you know, it's not always an officer issue that we need to, and you can correct me if I'm understanding this incorrectly, but I know I'm always worried about the public, and if I see someone on the street who looks like they need help, I'm going to call the communications center. And I did that recently, and I was told, well, you know, I'm going to get you off to the ambulance. And I said, well, what do you mean? Why aren't the police going? So I didn't understand the process. But I guess if you could kind of explain for the public's benefit, I didn't write this question down, so I'm kind of stumbling here, but it's not always a police officer call. Like, our officers don't always need to go, but if it becomes an issue where they find out it's, fire has to go or the ambulance needs to go, but then the call needs to come back to the police, then our teams will go. Does that make sense with the question that I'm trying to get around to without a coffee this morning?
Absolutely. So Regina is a 911 answering point, and so any call to 911 will come to us. And so the first question typically is, what is your emergency? Do you require police, fire, or ambulance? And so if it's medical, obviously we transfer that call to EMS. They have their own dispatcher, and so then they can get the ambulance on the way. But we'll sort of stay on the line just to make sure. So, it might be, as a random example, we need an ambulance, and then someone was stabbed. Well, clearly that is both a medical and a police response, and so we stay on the line long enough to determine if we do need to be sending police officers. Similarly with fire, we would determine if it's fire, we would transfer to fire. And then we have great communication amongst all of our agencies. So, EMS might get sent to a call for service. Maybe they're getting more information once we are off the line, and they might say, what, actually we think we do need police, and then we'll dispatch as a call. But that communication would come from EMS back to us, and then we dispatch a car or an officer to go. So I would say it works really seamlessly in terms of really good handoff to ensure that the appropriate agencies are responding to those medical or police or fire emergencies.
Right. And I think I just can't reiterate enough about how impressed I was with that team. And the one thing that I want to also point out is that, sometimes those officers, they have or I'm not sure what their title is, but they have a role where if the public is calling in and we're asking questions and then redirecting the public back to another question, it might seem like the officers aren't listening to the public, but we really are, because we need to make sure that that emergency is being handled. So I just wanted to bring that to light to everybody here today, that it's a great service that we offer, but there's always reasons behind whether we go to the call or not. And so I think the public needs some awareness about that.
Yeah, I thank you very much for spending your time. Our communications center staff are absolutely incredible. You think about calm under pressure, multitasking, trying to decipher information to be able to provide enough information to the officers so they can, we can send the right number to respond. Sometimes it's unclear whether we're going to the right address or not. So absolutely gathering that information is incredible. And so, they really have to be sort of a jack of all trades in terms of being able to decipher that information and then determining if it is police, fire, EMS, or is it best handled by, another agency, or it's not really a matter that police would be involved in. And so, it's they really are our front line in terms of communications with the public, and it's incredible. Well, you think our calls for service are up so far this year, so they're busier than ever. I just thank you for your time and recognizing them, that we are really blessed to have such dedicated professionals who answer those phones day in, day out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Awesome. Thank you for the presentation, and
Thank you.
Great discussion on that one. Okay, so with that, can I have a motion to receive and file the report? Councillor Siklees. And I'll call the question. Any opposed? Carried. Okay, next we have PO 26-31, Regina Police Service Monthly Crime Overview, July 2026, and I'll go back to you, Chief Davies.
Thank you. Well, we've had a lot of discussion already about crime statistics, so I will keep this brief, but certainly happy to entertain any questions you might have. As aptly indicated, these are the July 2026 crime statistics. And so we are up slightly in terms of total reported crime, up 3.6% from the same time last year. Crimes against the person increased by 1.1%, and property crimes increased by 4.4%. Some of the similar trends, as Camelin mentioned, thefts are a pressure point in terms of having that impact on our overall crime. They are up. We've talked about that previously in terms of shoplifting. And then theft overs. It is relatively a small number of incidents, but as mentioned, that $5,000 threshold isn't as valuable as it used to be back in the day. And so we're seeing more crimes that go over that $5,000 value. As was pointed out by Councillor Sickley's, our admissions to the complex needs facility were 294 in July, which is the highest amount of transports there since the facility has been opened. Again, I credit our downtown safety team for really doing a fantastic job of ensuring people are able to get the assistance they need. Especially those who are vulnerable in our downtown areas. It was alluded to earlier that calls for service were up over the 10-year period, and as of the end of July, our calls for service are up 5.4% from the previous year. Again, it's hard for us to break down, sort of what number are criminal offenses, but certainly that we are seeing more people reaching out to the RPS for a variety of issues, certainly. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have, but I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Questions from members? Go ahead, Robert.
In reference to the pepper spray attack here at the Queen City X, I understand that the city adopted the Safe Public Spaces Act back in October of last year. Could you speak a bit to how that's influenced our work and in relation to street weapons? Thank you.
So I don't have up-to-date information. The last information I had was for the first few months in 2026. I think we have issued at that point, it was approximately 6 tickets under the Safe Public Spaces Act. The majority of those were for either pepper spray or knives. I think as we previously talked about, there used to be different legislation where we could charge for having pepper spray in a public place or in a canister that was defaced, and so those charges now aptly fall under the Safe Public Spaces Act. And then the other ones were in relation to a weapon. So anecdotally, one that I recall reviewing, it was a shoplift file. We went there, it didn't turn out to be shoplifting. When they interacted with the individual, he had a knife on him. They took the knife, they issued him a ticket. It was someone who had complex issues, and so they didn't proceed with a criminal charge, but issued a ticket and took the knife away as sort of that lesser penalty in terms of what was appropriate. So that's just one example. I know we will be bringing a report back to the board later this fall, sort of that one-year analysis in terms of what that has looked like in terms of enforcement for the RPS.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Councillor Adams, go ahead.
Hey, so thank you. Noticing that e-bikes and e-scooters on the road, I kind of do a double take when I see folks in traffic. I saw a couple just today. And so are you noticing any kind of trends with calls for incidents with those modes of transportation, which I'm not against, but it's odd to see that in traffic, though. That's all.
For sure. Well, you are likely aware of an incident that we highlighted back on July 22nd, where our officers interacted with a number of young people who didn't stop for police, and then we ended up having to sort of follow them around the city before we were able to corral them, so to speak. They were issued a large number of fines. And I think the big piece here is that there are rules and regulations around the age that you have to be to operate these, the different, where you can rightfully ride one, where you can't, what's certainly what's appropriate. And so we have tried to do some education in terms of what that looks like and let members of the public know. I think as a parent, potentially parents didn't understand, all the regulations and rules around it. And so we're urging them to have those conversations, certainly with their children, to ensure that everyone is safe. And really, it does boil down to safety of the users. We don't want someone getting hurt. You think about, they can go quite high speeds, and so there is a potential for injury. So we really want to ensure that everyone is following the rules. I think probably since this incident, we've likely received a few more calls asking likely for clarification, education, but probably some or police response in order to be able to deal with those issues. So yes, you are correct in seeing that that has significantly raised in profile over the last month.
Good, thank you for that. And one of the person I saw this morning was wearing a really great helmet, and I think the safety does really matter, and so that's important. Thank you.
Councillor Sickley, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Radens. I was just parked at home last night, got out of my vehicle, and there was one of my residents was out for a walk, and she grabbed me for a 1-hour discussion. And I told her I'm going to be here this morning, and I promised I would speak to you directly, Chief, about this. So here we are on camera doing that. There are 1 or 2 folks that have been quite vocal to me and to the mayor, actually. I think they copy all of us when they write into us about what appears to be under 16, no protection, speeding on pathways, not on the streets. So it's my understanding that they've called Service Regina, and they've also called the RPS. So I guess, could I get some sort of commitment that there'll be some sort of monitoring? And, I can tell you where these spots are in my neighborhood, and I'm sure the rest of council can do the same, to just have a better eye on this. People are afraid for themselves when they're out for a walk because they see these kids come real quick, and they're also afraid for the kids, and they're wondering whether their parents know they're even doing this. Again, no protection, really fast on pathways. I'm not an expert on the bylaws, but I think you just mentioned them, and could you just talk a little bit more about that and what the plan might be to maybe get out there in the community and make an impact?
For sure. So I think number one is the education piece. So I know that we've been on our social media channels. We've been certainly sharing all that information around what the rules are. And so certainly that will continue in terms of getting that information out. We're happy to have anyone amplify those messages. So, to share via your community associations or through other means, because I think education, number one, will be the big piece. Number two, we always are responsive to specific crime trends or issues that might be happening in neighborhoods. Every week, our officers who work in all of our geographical areas are given sort of information to say, hey, here's something we're seeing. Can you direct attention there over the course of the next week? And so that happens on a weekly basis. So certainly if we're seeing something that is an issue, obviously we're getting complaints about it, then we can direct our officers who work in that area. And Kyle can maybe speak to this a little more around what that looks like. But we ask them to, hey, you've got a little bit of free time in between calls. Can you just go and hang out or walk through the park or just be in the area? So that's certainly something that is part of our regular everyday duties. And like I said, we're responsive to the public in terms of what they're seeing as an issue, and then we can, direct attention as needed.
Week to week, we have proactive policing initiatives in all areas of the city, and one of the biggest things that we need people to tell us what's going on, and it's that constant communication we have with the public and community groups. And so when these issues do arise, if people we're more than willing to take the call. We have people assigned in each area that will go out and meet with them or talk to them on the phone or email, whatever kind of communication works best for the individual. And when we start seeing the trends, then we put in plans to respond to them. So we can talk off after, but if there's information you want to pass on to us, we'll gladly look at it.
Thanks, Kyle. Thank you. Thank you both.
Other questions from members? Doug, go ahead.
I just want to ask a question on, I was looking at under the Communications Center, alarm calls for service. Looks like in July, we attended to 119 calls, two that were identified as real, so it's a 98.3% false alarm rate. I'm curious if this is maybe an area we could be looking to other cities and other jurisdictions to see, is there a way for us to adjust this where, we're not going to 119 calls and 117 of them maybe are not the best use of resources? But I'd like to hear from you, Chief.
Certainly. So we have made improvements in that area over the last number of years. So we've updated our databases in terms of alarm calls. We actually do have a policy where if there's 3 false alarms, then we don't attend after that. And we will be coming to the board in the next few months to ask for a change in the bylaw that will sort of further encourage good use of the alarms and have, I'd say, more, we would like people to register their alarms. There might be a small fee, and then that you're more apt to keep on top of it and ensure that it's updated and all the information is updated. And then when we do have false alarms, we can hold people accountable. So we are definitely looking at that. Well, there will be a report coming this year, and then we'll talk about it further then. But yes, absolutely. That number, I would say, over even the last 10 years has, the amount of alarms that we go to has dropped dramatically because we did do a lot of work in terms of cleaning up that database and ensuring that we had the right key holder information. So before the alarm company calls us, they call the actual business owner or the resident, and then they can say, oh no, never mind, don't send the police. I set it off accidentally. And so we've done a lot of work in that area, but there's still improvements to be made. So great question, and yes, stay tuned.
Michelle, go ahead.
Okay, couple things here, and I love reading these reports and seeing what's happening in the city here, so thanks for all the detail there. I would like to see if we can separate the charges and warnings for the cell phones. I'm always interested to see how those numbers are changing and how many people are getting warnings and actually getting charged. Another stat, and actually before I do that, one thing that I just, the e-scooter comment came up here, and I wanted to point out, I'm correct in saying that the aerial support unit was used to find those dangerous e-scooter drivers, is that correct?
So yes, on the night that happened, obviously, our ground officers would have communicated saying, hey, these people took off from us, our plane was up, and so they were able to direct members to find them wherever they were. You can imagine if you're zipping through parks and trees and all that areas, that the plane would have been a huge support in that file.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that because I know that I sometimes hear comments about why does the police service need a plane? And it's for the safety of everybody, so just kind of highlighting that again. But a couple of things here with the report, the process for reporting impaired drivers so that the public is safe and everyone is safe. Can we kind of highlight that? How does the public, what is that process so that we are not on our phones reporting drivers while we're trying to drive? And then with that as well, it looks like there's a low amount of impaired driving reported in the city based on this report that we see. Is that accurate?
So a couple things there. So there is a program called RID, Report Impaired Drivers. And so we captured when we receive calls because of that program. But basically the person has to say, I saw the sign or I know about the Report Impaired Driver program, and then we check that that falls under that program. We get many calls for impaired drivers outside of those that fall under that program. So if you didn't mention the Report Impaired Driver program, if you just said, hey, I'm driving along this, I suspect this person is impaired for A, B, C, and D. Obviously, it's still an impaired driving call for service, but it's just not captured specifically under that line. So I would say that that number, is a very small representation of the amount of calls we get for receiving impaired driving information. And obviously, we always want people to ensure that they're safe before calling us. So pulling over, ensuring that it's safe to make that call. And certainly we don't want people to sort of pursue someone, just give us the best information that they can. If they're able to get a license plate number, vehicle description, description of driver, then turn it over to our professionals up in the communications center to relay that information to our frontline.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing with the communication center here, can you let the public know what the process is for abandoning 911 calls? I mean, I've misdialed sometimes 911, but I guess the one thing we want to let the public know is stay on the phone because it takes us time to call them back, right? So if we could highlight that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a process anytime that a 911 call gets into our dispatch center, even if someone hangs up or, we can't, maybe it's an open line, but we can't really tell what the emergency is. We aren't able to talk to someone. We need to verify whether or not there is an actual emergency. So if someone accidentally dials, 911, they hang up, then we do have to call back and say, try and ascertain what the problem was. Because there are situations where someone is in an emergency, they've called 911, they're not able to stay on the phone. And so that's a fail-safe for us to ensure that we are able to get help to those folks. But yes, absolutely. If you've accidentally dialed, stay on the line so we can ask the appropriate questions to determine whether or not there is an actual emergency, and then we can take it from there. So it does take time to, try and call back, determine what's going on. So absolutely, thank you
It's
for
a good
highlighting that.
message because then that could take up, am I still on? That could take the time from another emergent call coming in, so
Absolutely.
thank you.
Great, and just building on, that's great. That's something I learned today about the Report Impaired Drivers program. It might be valuable to put that in our report. Like we have a couple of asterisks, just to highlight that that's not reflective of the total calls that we get, because that is definitely something that might be confusing to the public. So that's good one to bring up. Any other questions? Manmeet, go ahead.
Looking at the report and the numbers, I just want to highlight that the number of overdoses have been rising constantly. I see report mentions 705 overdoses in July. What would you like to give a message to the public there, Chief, to those that are dealing with substance addictions and or whether they are trying recreational drugs for the first time or whatever may be the case? What to be careful about, etc. And I see there was a big bust yesterday that took 3 months to get to. So police is doing everything that they can, but we need public to be aware and stay vigilant and be careful. Maybe a message about that.
Yes, thank you. Over the last number of years with fentanyl coming into our communities, obviously it's had a huge impact on the number of lives lost. So certainly we understand and appreciate that there are people who have very complex addiction issues. Certainly we ask people if they are using to do so in a manner where they're with someone, that they are equipped with Narcan, naloxone, they're at a safe injection site so that there is someone there that can then take care of them if there is fatal drugs in that dosage. And certainly, if someone was thinking about trying recreational drugs for the first time, we would urge them not to. We just don't know what are in these substances that are in our community, and that the first time could be your last time. There is no way to guarantee what you have is safe or to even be able to verify what is in it. And so certainly we're encouraging people to just not understand that that's, for people who have addiction health issues, that's not always quite so easy. But certainly there are a number of resources in our community. Like I say, we're taking people to the complex needs facility and they're able to set people up with treatment beds. And so there is always a path out. And we encourage people to just look for those supports in the community to access those resources. But certainly I think my biggest message is that one time can be your last time, and there is just no way to determine whether or not what you're taking is safe. So we just ask people to not do it.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, could I have a motion to receive and file the report? Manmeet, I'll call the question. Any opposed? And carried. Okay, can I have a resolution for private session? Councillor Sickley's. I'll call the question. Any opposed? And carried. We will recess for 20 minutes. Thanks, everybody.